On the day, Kui Lingwan was conferred the title of National Scholar. The military strategies presented to the imperial court were ones I had written in my own hand. Yet my husband, Xiao Chengyan, stood before the throne and personally accused me of stealing the manuscript out of jealousy and framing a talented scholar. Kneeling at the foot of the palace steps, I asked him just one question. Your Highness, do you truly believe those strategies were written by her? He paused for a moment before answering, yes. As I was being escorted out of the hall, he suddenly gripped my wrist and whispered, hold on for another half year, and I'll give you everything back. But he didn't know. Those military strategies were missing the last 2 pages, and the 30,000 border troops had already set out following them. On the day, Kui Lingwan was in Foft. A light rain was falling outside the Taiji Hall. Rainwater wound its way down the golden steps, pooling at my knees. I had been kneeling for nearly an hour. The hem of my skirt was soaked and ice-cold. 2 imperial prison guards stood behind me, their waist swords hanging by my shoulders. Inside the hall, officials offered their congratulations in unison, their voices rising in wave after wave. The first female statesman of Daxing is indeed clear proof of your majesty's eagerness to seek out talent. Miss Kui has offered counsel anonymously for 7 years, eschewing empty fame. She is truly a model for the scholarly community. Master Jia's talent has finally seen the light of day. I looked up. Kui Lingwan stood before the imperial desk, holding the newly bestowed golden seal in both hands. She wore a blue court robe. Her hair was free of pearls and jewels, adorned only with a single ebony hairpin. This attire suited her well. It exuded integrity and composure. She did not look like a noblewoman from a secluded mansion, but rather like someone who had endured countless long nights. Beside her lay half a volume of military manuscripts. The paper had grown old, its edges marked with yellow stains from smoke. In the lower right corner of the 3rd page, there was still a drop of pine soot ink that could never be washed away. That drop of ink was left by me 7 years ago. Emperor Chengshi asked, 7th Prince, you have repeatedly offered sound strategies over the years. Was it all thanks to the support of State Councillor Kui behind the scenes? Xiao Chengyan stood at the foot of the imperial steps. Today he wore a jet-black princely court robe with an old jade clasp fastened at his waist. Engraved on the back of the clasp were the 2 characters Tongjin, United Hearts. 7 years ago, when he first earned praise in court for my military strategy, he carved this jade clasp with his own hands that very night, saying that no matter what lay ahead, wealth, honor, life, or death, we would always be of one heart as husband and wife. At that moment, he did not look at me. Your Majesty, Miss Kui is humble and does not wish to take credit. I too only learned recently that Master Jia is actually her. The emperor pointed to several letters scattered across the hall. Why did Lady Jiang claim that she wrote those military manuscripts? Xiao Chengyan's fingers curled slightly, just for an instant. Then, he bowed and said, my mother has been troubled of late. Upon seeing Miss Kui arrive in the capital, she feared I might rely too heavily on an outsider. So she stole the manuscripts from our residence and forged letters, intending to claim the credit for herself. A low murmur of discussion rose from the hall. The daughter of a convicted minister, jealous, claiming the merits of a national hero. None of these words were new. The emperor asked again, do you recognize the military maps seized from her room? I do. But are they the items lost by State Councillor Kui? Xiao Chengyan finally turned his face toward me. Our gazes met across the dozens of court officials in the hall. I did not cry out in protest, nor did I plead with him. I simply asked, Your Highness, are you certain those strategies were written by her? His Adam's apple shifted slightly. Kui Lingwan kept her eyes downcast, her fingertips gently pressing against the edge of the golden seal. Everyone in the hall was waiting for his answer. I am certain. The Taiyi Hall was empty, yet that single word echoed not at all. It fell straight into my ears. Emperor Chengshi raised his hand. Have the Jiang woman taken to the imperial prison. The case of stealing state secrets and framing a national hero shall be referred to the 3 departments for a joint trial. Her father, Zhang Zhengyuan's case of colluding with the enemy from last year shall be investigated as well. The guards yanked me to my feet. As I passed by Xiao Chengyan, he suddenly reached out and steadied me. To onlookers, it might have seemed as though the bonds of marriage had not yet been severed. Yet his thumb pressed down hard on my wrist. Lingyi, bear with it a little longer. His voice was extremely low. Once I take the throne in the East Palace, I will give everything back to you. I looked at the jade clasp at his waist. 7 years ago, when I secured his first victory for him, he was still just an obscure prince. No one reserved a seat for him at palace banquets, and even his winter charcoal rations were withheld by the Imperial Household Department. Back then, he held my hand and promised he would never let me down in this lifetime. Now he has risen, high enough, so high that he can no longer see me. I pulled my hand away. On that day, Kui Lingwan became Master Jia, and the true Master Jia died at the foot of the golden steps of the Taiji Hall. It all began 20 days ago. Kui Lingwan arrived in the capital with half a volume of military manuscripts and moved directly into the Kui family's villa on Chang'an Street. That very afternoon, 3 court officials arrived at the 7th prince's residence, reporting that the Kui clan of Qinghe had tracked down Master Jia, who had been in hiding for 7 years. When I first heard this news, I was organizing military reports from the northern frontier for Xiao Chengyan. He stood by the window, his back to me, remaining silent for a long time. I closed the military reports. Your Highness, won't you go see him? I don't know if it's true yet. His tone was calm, yet his fingers lingered on the window lattice for a long time. That night, Kui Lingwan delivered the half-volume of manuscript to the mansion. Xiao Chengyan ordered the study sealed, leaving only him and me inside. I turned to the first page, and the familiar scent of ink greeted me. The paper was genuine. The handwriting was genuine as well. It was my handwriting. 7 years ago, fearing my identity would be exposed, I deliberately altered my brushstroke. The horizontal strokes were cut off very short, and there was often a jarring pause at the turns completely different from the delicate, flower-adorned small script calligraphy I usually wrote. Yet I recognized every single stroke. The ink smudge on the third page was left when Xiao Chengyan suddenly pushed open the door and I instinctively closed the book, causing the ink to smear. There's a scratch from a knife on the 6th page that year. The military reports from the northern frontier were 2 days late, and I misjudged the enemy's grain supplies. I didn't realize my mistake until I was halfway through writing. The paper on the 9th page is a bit thinner because the prince's mansion was short on funds, so I had Qing Dai tear it from an old ledger. Xiao Chengyan asked, "Is it real?" "The first half of the volume is real." I flipped back a few more pages. The conclusions for each strategy were all there. Only the last 2 sections were missing. My father taught me to analyze military matters, and he never sought just a single viable strategy. First question, the primary strategy. If the military intelligence is accurate, what should be done? Second question, the counter scenario. If the military intelligence is incorrect and the enemy general acts contrary to expectations, what should be done then? The third question, abandoning the strategy. When must one admit that the original strategy has failed and immediately abandon it? The booklet in Kui Lingwan's hands contained only the primary strategy. It already seemed astonishing enough. But once on the battlefield without the answers to the last 2 questions, even a sound strategy could easily become a death warrant. Xiao Chengyan took the military manuscript from my hand. "Has anyone else seen this booklet?" I looked at him. I had thought he would ask who had stolen it. Instead, he asked who else had seen it. Every time I finished writing, I handed it directly to His Highness, I said. "Besides you and me, only the scribe in charge of transcribing it has occasionally handled it." He lowered his head and flipped through the pages. "What about the Privy Council?" "Only the transcribed copies were sent to the Privy Council. Where are your original manuscripts?" I didn't answer right away. He looked up, as if realizing he'd asked too abruptly, and his tone softened slightly. "I need to know how much evidence I still have to prove your case." I looked at him. The lamp burned steadily. There was not a hint of emotion in his eyes. "In the secret compartment," he said, "give me the key." I didn't move. Xiao Chengyan stepped closer and gripped my shoulder. "Lingyi, I'm not doubting you. I'm afraid that since the Kuai family managed to get their hands on half the scroll, they might strike again. If you leave it with me, at least it'll be safe." In our 7 years of marriage, he had rarely spoken to me in this tone. In the end, I took the key from around my neck. As he took it, his fingertips lingered briefly in the palm of my hand. "Don't worry." The next day, the emperor hosted a banquet at Changhua Pavilion to test Kui Lingwan. She answered, very well. She answered fluently on how the 3 northwestern cities should provide mutual aid, how many supply routes should be maintained in winter, and when cavalry should dismount to fight on foot. The answers to those questions were already written in her notes. Several veteran generals nodded frequently. Emperor Chengxi was in high spirits and even allowed those present to pose impromptu questions. Sitting beside Xiao Chengyan, I asked Kui Lingwan. "I once heard His Highness mention a strategy to deploy defenses on the east bank of the Yan River. If the river's course has shifted 3 li to the west and the old riverbed has dried up, would this strategy still be viable?" Kui Lingwan glanced at me. "Though the river has changed course, the terrain has not changed abruptly. We can order the rear army to transport grain along the old riverbed, while the front army maintains its position on the high ground along the east bank, ready to cut off the enemy's retreat once they cross the river." She answered calmly. Most of those present were civil officials. They could not detect any flaw in her reasoning. I asked, "What if the old riverbed hasn't completely dried up?" Her finger lightly rested on the rim of her cup. "Since your highness said it had dried up, how could it not be completely dry? The surface may be dry, but the silt beneath remains. As soon as a heavily laden cart passes, its wheels will sink in. The rear troops will be unable to advance or retreat. How then can the front troops wait for provisions?" Kui Lingwan paused for a moment. Just as I was about to ask another question, Xiao Chengyan suddenly spoke up. "Lady Lingyi is unfamiliar with the hydrology of the northern frontier." He filled Kui Lingwan's cup to the brim. "If the Yanhui River has truly changed its course, the grain route should be shifted to the northern slope. It wouldn't still follow the old riverbed." Miss Kui's answer just now was based on the original terrain, so it was naturally correct. Kui Lingwan raised her eyes. "Your Highness is quite right." After the banquet, on the way back to the mansion, I remained silent the entire time in the carriage. Xiao Chengyan spoke first. "You shouldn't have pressed her today. She gave the wrong answer. It was just a banquet, not an actual military deployment. Precisely because it wasn't an actual military deployment, we should have used today to see clearly whether she is truly capable. If we wait until we're on the battlefield to make a mistake, people will die." He raised his hand to rub the bridge of his nose. "The Kui family has already contacted the 8 great clans and is willing to nominate me as heir apparent. With the current situation still unclear, humiliating her in public will do us no good." "Us?" I repeated the question. "Your Highness knew she had answered incorrectly, yet you corrected it for her. Others will only assume she is as well versed in military affairs as Master Jia Yi." He was silent for a moment. "I'll get to the bottom of this." "How long?" 3 days. The carriage stopped in front of the mansion's gate. He stepped down first and held out his hand to me. "Give me 3 days, Lingyi." I took his hand and stepped down from the footstool. At that time, I still believed he was merely weighing how to minimize the damage. I never imagined. What he was weighing was never how to restore my name. Rather, it was how to make the most of that name. On the second night, I had Qing Dai stand guard outside the study. I took out the blank military map from that first battle in the northern frontier 7 years ago and spread it out before Xiao Chengyan. Your Highness, do you remember the Battle of Qingxi Ridge? I do. That was the first time he had been summoned by the Emperor. It was also the first time Master Jia appeared in the military reports. I placed 3 black pieces north of the ridge. Back then, the military report stated that 2,000 enemy cavalry were stationed at Qingxi Ridge with their provisions in the rear. The court advocated for a frontal assault. Xiao Chengyan watched my hands. You said that was a decoy. Because the military report stated that the enemy drew water every afternoon. With 2,000 war horses, it's impossible for them to draw water only once a day. I placed 2 more white stones on the board. The real cavalry is hidden in the woods to the west. The troops on Qingxi Ridge are just infantry, deliberately kicking up dust to make scouts mistake them for a cavalry unit. I moved the white stones around the southern side, so we shouldn't attack the ridge. Instead, we should set fire to the dry grass outside the western woods to force the cavalry to come out early, then use bows and crossbows to cut off their retreat. Xiao Chengyan's gaze grew increasingly somber. I continued. The night the military report arrived, the candle flames singed the southeast corner. I mistook Silu Slope for Silu Slope and added an extra 10i to the rough draft. You noticed I hadn't slept all night and refilled the lamp oil for me 3 times. This was something only the 2 of us knew. I never wrote it into the military report. It was even less likely that Kui Lingwan would know. The study remained silent for a long time. Xiao Chengyan reached out and pressed down on the white piece representing Shilin. It was you. I asked, does your highness believe me now? I should have realized this long ago. His voice was very low. I looked at him. Then we'll go to the palace tomorrow. He didn't respond. What Kui Lingwan has in her possession is genuine. As long as I reanalyze it, His Majesty will naturally be able to tell the difference. If we investigate the copyist maids in the mansion, we'll find out how the manuscript leaked. We can't go. Why? He stood up from in front of the military map and turned his back to me. The Kui family sent a list today, 8 prominent clans, 21 court officials. As soon as Kui Lingwan becomes Master Jia, they'll sign a joint petition asking Father Emperor to name an heir. I slowly rolled up the military map. So what? I'll borrow her for half a year. I almost thought I'd heard wrong. Xiao Chengyan turned and walked over to me. Just half a year. Once I take the throne in the East Palace and the court is stable, I'll reopen my father-in-law's old case and clear your name. How will you clear it? I'll have Kui Lingwan step down from the court. On what grounds? He paused. I'll say she's unwell and will no longer be involved in military affairs. I asked, what about me? You're still the 7th prince's consort, and in the future, you'll be the crown princess. That's not what I'm asking. He reached out to support me, but I took a step back. For the past 6 months, what has been my status? Kui Lingwan is Master Jia, and your highness is a wise ruler who recommends the nation's finest talents. So who am I? You are my wife. Does a wife not have a name? He furrowed his brow. Lingyi, this is no time to argue over a mere title. If a military strategy fails, the person whose name is on it bears the responsibility. If it succeeds, that person receives a title. How can a name be meaningless? Husband and wife are one. Those strategies were used in the 7th prince's mansion. What difference does it make whether you or I receive the credit? If there's no difference, why can't my name be on it? He didn't answer. I had already seen the answer. Xiao Chengyan needs the Kui family. The Kui family needs a woman of exceptional talent whose achievements can be tied to those of the 7th prince. But I have no maternal clan, no spotless family background, and my father is accused of colluding with the enemy. My talents can help him secure the empire, yet my name cannot win him a single vote from the aristocratic families. I disagree, I said. His expression grew a bit colder. Lingyi, I disagree. Don't you want to overturn your father-in-law's conviction? I do. Then you should endure these 6 months all the more. I placed the military map back on the shelf. I can investigate my father's case, offer strategies to the border troops, and even act anonymously when your highness faces his greatest challenges. But I can't stand by and watch someone else step on my military drafts to earn a title, and then have to cover for her. Xiao Chengyan gripped my wrist. I won't let you get truly hurt. I lowered my eyes to look at his hand. You're borrowing my name today? What about tomorrow? There is no tomorrow. Your highness always says that. He slowly let go of me. Go back first. Let me think this over. I walked to the door, then turned back. Give me back the key to the secret compartment. Xiao Chengyan's gaze remained fixed on the tabletop. He didn't move. I'll keep the original manuscript for now. That night, for the first time, I had Qing Dai lock the door to my bedroom from the outside. 3 days later, the military map that Kui Lingwan had lost appeared in my study. The search came quickly. When officials from the Ministry of Justice arrived at the mansion with the Emperor's written order, Xiao Chengyan was not there. They unearthed a wooden box from the bottom shelf of my bookshelf. Inside the box were the 2 military maps Kui Lingwan had reported lost, 6 letters written in imitation of her handwriting, and a personal seal engraved with the characters, Zhao Yi. I looked at the seal. The person who carved it didn't know that I never stamped my military drafts. For someone acting in secret to leave a seal is tantamount to leaving a clue for others to trace. Chumping, the maidservant responsible for transcribing the military drafts, knelt in the courtyard. It was the princess consort who ordered me to steal them. Her voice trembled as she repeatedly rubbed her right wrist with one hand. The princess consort said that once Miss Kui arrived in the capital, His Highness would begin to neglect her. She ordered me to hide the military maps in my room and to forge several letters in Miss Kui's handwriting to prove that she had been in contact with Master Jiaye for some time. Qing Dai, enraged, lunged forward but was firmly held back by the guards. You're lying. The princess consort never allows you near her. You can't even enter the door to her study. Chumping kept her head down. The princess consort gave this servant the key. I asked, which one? She looked up at me. It's made of brass with a bamboo leaf engraved on the end. That's the key to the secret compartment. The one around my neck. I handed it over to Xiao Chengyan 3 days ago. An official from the Ministry of Justice asked, does the princess consort have anything to say? I wish to see the 7th prince. His Highness is currently in the palace. Then, I'll wait for him to return. Xiao Chengyan didn't enter the courtyard until nightfall. The search party had long since left, leaving only 2 officers to guard the gate. He dismissed the servants and closed the door. Stay in the courtyard for a few days. Where is my manuscript? What manuscript? The one in the secret compartment. He avoided my gaze. The secret compartment is empty. I walked up to him. A faint whiff of smoke clung to his lapels. It wasn't the dragon's saliva incense used in the palace. It was the smell left behind after paper had been burned. Did you burn it? Lingyi, the situation has spiraled out of control. Leaving those manuscripts behind would only give the Kuya family more ammunition against us. Leverage? My father-in-law's handwriting and your deductive methods, they could use them to accuse us of collaborating with the enemy. I can't let these things fall into the hands of outsiders. I stared at the speck of ash on his cuff. So you destroyed them for them first. I was protecting you. Who brought the military maps in? He paused for a moment. I'll look into it. How did Chumping know what the key to the secret compartment looked like? She wasn't the only one who's been in the mansion. But you have the key. Xiao Chengyan's voice grew solemn. Do you think I'm framing you? I didn't answer. He reached out to pull me, but I tucked my hand back into my sleeve. The 3 departments will come to question you tomorrow, he said. All you need to do is admit that you transcribed military documents for Kui Lingwan. Out of consideration for the 7th prince's household, she'll cut you some slack, and the matter can be swept under the rug. And after I admit it, once I enter the Eastern Palace. The Eastern Palace again. I interrupted him. Xiao Chengyan, you already know she's a fraud. I know. You also know I didn't steal anything. I know. Then will you testify on my behalf tomorrow? He didn't speak right away. Someone walked past outside the courtyard, and the shadow of a lamp flickered across the rice paper window. I waited until that shadow disappeared. Only then did Xiao Chengyan whisper, I can't right now. The next day, I was taken to the Tai Hall, and so the investiture ceremony took place. There was his, I'm certain, and there was that hold on for another half year. As I was escorted out of the palace gates, I glanced back. Kui Lingwan's National Scholar gold seal lay on the imperial desk, illuminated by the lights, filling the hall. Xiao Chengyan stood beside her. A half step separated the 2 of them, like a pair of allies each getting what they wanted. I didn't look a second time. The walls of the imperial prison were perpetually damp. Any paper brought in would become damp after just one night. Fearing the prisoners might tear the paper to commit suicide, the guards gave them only a worn-out brush during each interrogation and took it away immediately after they finished writing. The man interrogating me was surnamed Chen. He was the Vice Minister of Justice. He first asked about the stolen imperial edict, then about my father. Zhang Zhengyuan arbitrarily altered military orders back then, leading to the loss of 3 cities on the northern frontier. As his daughter, you corresponded with the border troops under a false name. Did you intend to carry on your father's legacy? I looked at the several military reports on the desk. I did not correspond with the border troops under a false name. Vice Minister Chen sneered. The Zhenbei army sends secret letters to the 7th prince's residence every year. Surely they aren't just family letters. They concern military affairs. So you admit it? Military reports are delivered to the residence, and His Highness occasionally asks me to organize them. That's not against the law. He pulled out one of the letters. This is a military report from the northern frontier dated 3 days ago. He Shuo reported that the enemy forces have retreated beyond the Yanhui River. Li Guoxi suggested pressing the advantage and pursuing them. What is your opinion? He wasn't really interested in asking me about military affairs. He merely wanted to prove why I, a woman confined to the inner quarters, was so familiar with the border. I did not touch the military report. I merely glanced over it with downcast eyes. The report detailed the water level of the Yanhui River, the daily distance grain carts could travel, and the number of war horses that had become bogged down in the past half month. The water level was 2 feet lower than it had been 7 years ago. Yet the grain carts were traveling at half their usual speed. If the river had receded, the road should have been easier to travel. Unless the Yanhui River has changed course, the surface of the old riverbed is dry and hard, but beneath it lies nothing but soft mud. The strategy Kui Lingwan intended to employ was precisely the same one used 7 years ago. A surprise attack from the riverbank. I asked, will a copy of this military report be sent to the Privy Council? Vice Minister Chen narrowed his eyes. According to protocol, the relevant testimony regarding the military affairs case must be submitted. Then let it be recorded in the testimony. He motioned for the clerk to begin writing. I spoke slowly. This guilty woman once saw the military strategy devised by Quagwash. If upon returning to the old riverbed, the daily advance of supply wagons is less than 30 li, and more than 7 out of every 100 war horses become bogged down, then we must not advance via the old riverbed. Vice Minister Chen slammed his fist down on the table. I am asking whether you are colluding with the enemy. That is precisely what I am answering. What do you mean by that? If the enemy knows our forces will definitely take the old riverbank route, they need only set up ambushes on both sides of the river valley. Once our 30,000 troops enter, with the path ahead blocked and our supply wagons stuck in the mud, we will have no way to retreat. You're exaggerating the danger. Please record this. The clerk dared not put pen to paper. I said, statements in the military affairs case files must be transcribed word for word. If Minister Chen omits any part, there will be 2 missing lines at the seam, and the Privy Council will detect it. Vice Minister Chen's expression shifted slightly. My father, who had previously served as a Privy Councillor, once took me to view the military affairs case files. Ordinary statements can be edited or deleted, but not in major military affairs cases. The Imperial Prison, the Ministry of Justice, and the Privy Council each keep a copy, with a cross seal on every page. If a single character is missing, the 3 copies won't match up. He stared at me for a moment, then finally signaled the clerk to continue. I recited 3 more sets of numbers. 30, 7, 12. The clerk looked up. What does 12 mean? 12 lie ahead. We must scout the northern slope. This was the sequence of questions I used in my correspondence with Pei Shuo. First, provisions. Second, horses. Third, the retreat route. For 7 years, every letter began with these 3 questions. I didn't know if that confession would ever reach Pei Shuo, but I could only try this once. 2 days later, Vice Minister Chen returned, looking much more grim than last time. Pei Shuo altered the orders without authorization, and the scouts he dispatched discovered an enemy ambush on the northern slope. He slammed a new military report down on the table. How did you know about this in advance? I made out the line of text at the very end of the report. 18 scouts, not a single casualty. After 2 days of anxiety, my heart finally settled a little. I don't know. Then why did you have them scout the northern slope? Because if I were the enemy, that's where I'd place my ambush. Pei Shuo reported that your testimony followed Master Jiaye's format for interrogating enemy formations. My fingers, clenched inside my sleeve, slowly relaxed. He recognized it. Vice Minister Chen leaned forward. Madame Zhang, who exactly is Master Jiaye? A series of footsteps sounded from outside the iron gate. Xiao Chengyan walked in, shrouded in the night. Minister Chen, His Majesty has summoned you to the palace. Minister Chen glanced at us, put away the military report, and left. The prison door was locked again. Xiao Chengyan stood outside the railing, silent for a long time. After not seeing him for a few days, a bluish tint had appeared under his eyes. You shouldn't have written that in your confession. Where else was I supposed to write it? You could have given it to me, and then have Qiling Wan sign it. He clenched his fists. The scout incident has already aroused the Emperor's suspicion. If you sign a confession now, admitting that you transcribed military documents for Qiling Wan, I can save your life. Only a single oil lamp was lit in the prison cell. The flame flickered, casting his face in alternating light and shadow. And then, I asked, I'll get you out of the Imperial prison. Back to the 7th Prince's mansion. Not yet. There's a secluded villa in the West Garden. It's very quiet. I looked at him. What am I supposed to do there? Wait for the storm to pass. How long will that take? Not too long. Do I still have to write military strategies for you? Xiao Chengyan didn't deny it. Lingyi, I'm the only one who can protect you. I walked to the railing. Your Highness, what are you trying to protect my life? Or these hands that can still write military strategies? His face turned pale. Why do you insist on thinking so poorly of me? Hand over the confession. A glimmer of hope flashed in his eyes. The jailer handed him paper and a pen. I read through the confession from beginning to end, then tore it in half. The damp paper didn't make a crisp tearing sound. It just split softly. I won't confess. Xiao Chengyan stared at the paper lying on the ground. You'll die. Then it will be Jiang Lingyi who dies. I looked up. Not someone who transcribed military documents for Qiling Wan and survived only because of His Highness's secret protection. The scouts evaded the ambush, causing only a single day of turmoil in the court. At the next day's court session, Qiling Wan offered an explanation. She said the scouts' encounter with the ambush was merely a coincidence. Although the Yanhui River had changed course, the main force could still enter Yanhui Valley. All we need to do is feign weakness to lure the enemy into encircling us, then break out from the riverbank to encircle them in return. This strategy also comes from my manuscript, written 7 years ago. Back then, before the Yanhui River changed course, the riverbank was firm, and 3,000 light cavalry could circle around to the enemy's rear in a single night. To use it again now would be to cut off our own supply lines. Yet Qiling Wan could recite the troop strength and itinerary from back then by heart, and even remembered how many horses were lost in that battle. The court officials came to trust her once more. Xiao Chengyan vouched for her before the emperor, explaining that since I had lived in the 7th Prince's mansion for so long, I had seen some military reports, so it was no surprise that I had guessed correctly by chance. Emperor Chengxi ordered Pei Shuo to advance according to Qi Lingwan's strategy and bestowed upon her a golden seal, granting her direct authority to oversee military affairs in the northern frontier. When the news reached the imperial prison, the jailer was in the process of changing my bandages. During my interrogation a few days earlier, the iron shackles had chafed my wrists raw. The medicinal powder mixed with dust settled on the wounds, causing a searing pain. I asked, "When did the main force enter the valley?" The jailer dared not answer. I clenched my teeth on the cloth bandage wrapped around my wrist. When? Last night. 3 days later, an urgent dispatch from the northern frontier, traveling 800 li, arrived in the capital. The 30,000-strong main force was trapped in Yanhui Valley. The old riverbed was covered in silt, and the grain wagons were half submerged. The enemy had cut off their retreat from the northern slope and set fires on the southern side. There were only 5 days' worth of provisions left in the valley. The court held an emergency military council that very night. Qi Lingwan argued that Pei Shuo had failed to execute his orders properly, as he had not completed the surprise attack before the enemy encirclement was complete. She also proposed a direct assault on the southern slope. The southern slope is narrow. A direct assault would only result in a bloodbath. That night, Xiao Chengyan was imprisoned in the imperial prison once more. This time, he did not bring a confession. He brought only a military map of Yanhuigu Valley. Save them. He spread the military map out on the stone table outside his cell. I did not go over. Where is Qi Guaxi? Ling Yi. His Majesty bestowed a golden seal upon her. It is her duty to save the lives of the 30,000 soldiers. Xiao Chengyan pressed down on a corner of the military map. She can't come up with a solution. Then revoke her title of Guoxi. Not now. Why not? Are the lives of 30,000 people not important enough? Or is your highness's position as crown prince more important? If we expose her now, the Kui family will immediately side with the third prince. All the plans we've laid out over the past 7 years will be ruined in an instant. I looked at him. How many days' worth of provisions are left in the valley? 5 days. How many wounded soldiers are there? Nearly 4,000. On which side is the enemy's main force? It hasn't been determined yet. You expect me to draft a strategy when we know nothing. He lowered his voice. You can put it off for now. I walked to the stone desk and looked down at the map. Yanhui Valley is narrow and elongated from east to west, with a steep southern slope and a gentle northern slope. The old riverbed lies to the east of the valley and is no longer passable. On the western side, a disused salt trail is marked. It collapsed 20 years ago and has been unused ever since. Wind directions over the past 3 days. Xiao Chengyan handed me the military report. Northeasterly winds. What about the enemy's cooking smoke? 3 spots on the northern slope and 1 on the southern slope every day. 3 spots of cooking smoke don't necessarily mean 3 battalions. If the main force were truly on the northern slope, they would have launched a full-scale assault yesterday. They wouldn't wait for our troops to starve to death. I slowly traced my fingertip across the military map. They're waiting for Pei Shuo to break through the encirclement. The southern slope appears to have fewer troops, but in reality, it's where the archers and crossbowmen are most densely concentrated. A direct assault would play right into their hands. How do we break through? Take the western salt trail. That's already collapsed. The entrance has collapsed. If a northeast wind blows through the valley for 3 consecutive days, smoke won't accumulate inside the salt trail. Have men burn damp grass. By watching where the smoke escapes through the cracks, we can find the other end. A glint of hope flashed in Xiao Chengyan's eyes. Then withdraw our troops through the salt passage. Withdraw the wounded and the supply wagons first. The main force stays in the valley. At night, light more torches on the eastern side to make the enemy think we're still heading for the riverbank. Once the enemy redeploys troops to the east, we'll launch an attack from the salt passage. No. I looked up. It's not a strike. It's a retreat. He furrowed his brow. If we merely retreat, how can we turn this defeat around? If we can get 30,000 men out alive, that is already a victory. Xiao Chengyan stared at me. I knew what he was thinking. What the 7th prince needed was more than just a retreat. He needed to turn defeat into victory. He needed to preserve his reputation as a man of exceptional talent. And above all, he needed the court to continue believing in his ability to recognize and appoint capable men. There may be enemy forces waiting at the end of the salt road, he said. If we're intercepted during the retreat, our casualties will only be heavier. So we must first set aside any thoughts of victory. I pointed to a low-lying area outside the valley. Order 300 light cavalry to launch a feint attack from the northern slope to draw away the enemy scouts. The main force should travel without heavy armor, carrying only 3 days' rations. Once they exit the salt road, they must head west immediately and not look back to contest the camp. 7 days later, when the enemy discovers the valley is empty, they will naturally give chase. Pei Shuo can set an ambush at Whitestone Creek. That is when we'll have a chance to win. Xiao Chengyan remained silent for a long time. This strategy must be issued in the name of Qi Lingwan. I pushed the military map back toward him. Then it won't be issued. Jiang Lingyi, your highness may kill me. He gripped the railing tightly. If the border troops are annihilated, father will surely conclude that you deliberately withheld this rescue plan. My father-in-law's old case will also be confirmed. Can you bear to see the Jiang family bear yet another stain on its reputation? I looked at him for a long time. Prepare paper and ink. He slowly exhaled. I knew you wouldn't risk the lives of our soldiers on a whim. After the paper was brought in, I did not take the brush Xiao Chengyan handed me. Send for Minister Chen. This is urgent. Precisely because it is urgent, it must be incorporated into my confession of capital crimes and stamped with the overlapping seals of the Imperial Prison, the Ministry of Justice, and the Privy Council. His expression changed. It would be faster to send the military order directly. Your Highness need not wait. Ling Yi, I am saving Pei Shuo and 30,000 soldiers, not Kui Lingwan's national hero, Gold Seal. We gazed at each other through the prison gate. In the end, Xiao Chengyan still summoned Vice Minister Chen. I incorporated the Salt Road strategy into my confession. On the surface, there are only 3 steps: scouting, evacuating the wounded, and setting fires on the eastern flank. I wrote the actual order of the retreat in the quartermaster's numbers at the end of each paragraph. Read them backward, and you'll see the schedule for the westward march. This was the verification method Master Jia had used for the past 7 years to prevent secret letters from being intercepted. Xiao Chengyan couldn't make sense of it. Kui Lingwan certainly wouldn't understand it either. Only when Vice Minister Chen stamped the final seal across the seam did I put down my brush. Send it to the Privy Council. Xiao Chengyan stood outside the prison gate. Do you really no longer trust me? I looked down at the 5 characters, guilty woman Zhang Lingyi, on the confession. His Highness taught me that himself. 2 days after the Salt Road strategy was sent, Kui Shiqing submitted a memorial requesting that the case of the stolen strategy be tried together with my father's old case. Chumping also changed her testimony. She said that for the past 7 years I have been using the name Master Jia to secretly correspond with generals in the northern frontier. Those military strategies were not presented to the imperial court, but were used to liaise with the border troops on behalf of my father's former subordinates. In the past, when I did not admit to being Master Jia, they accused me of stealing military strategies. Now that the front lines have proven my judgment correct, they claim that Master Jia was a rebel all along. Emperor Chengxi issued an edict. If there is no good news from Yanhuigu within 3 days, I am to be executed for leaking military secrets and colluding with border generals. On the day the edict arrived, Xingdai bribed the old prison guard who delivered meals and sneaked into the imperial prison. She had lost a lot of weight, and the backs of her hands were covered in burns. As soon as she saw me, tears began to stream down her face. Miss, she still called me the same way she had when we were at the Jiang household. I wiped the tears from her face. How are things at the mansion? His Highness had us all imprisoned. I escaped while the kitchen staff was delivering charcoal. She pulled a charred scrap of paper from her bosom. The paper was no bigger than the palm of my hand. The edges were curled and blackened, and most of the writing was missing. I examined it closely by the light of the oil lamp. After the princess consort's passing, he moved to the West Garden to convalesce. The paper and ink remain the same. Reports are sent to the military headquarters every 10 days. At the bottom was half of an internal seal from the 7th prince's mansion. I clutched the paper, saying nothing. Xingdai wept so hard she could barely breathe. That day His Highness was burning things in his study. I smelled smoke, so I snatched this one while he was out. At first I couldn't make sense of it, but later, when I heard the steward assigning personnel to the West Garden, I realized. She clutched my hand tightly. Miss, he never intended to save you. The oil lamp flickered, and a spark burst from the wick. I looked down at the paper again. After the princess consort passed away, it wasn't that Kui Lingwan withdrew from court. Nor was it that my innocence was restored. Rather, it was Zhang Lingyi's passing. There is no longer a 7th prince's consort in this world. Yet in the West Garden, there will be a woman who cannot be seen by others, cannot have a name, and is only responsible for reviewing military reports on behalf of the crown prince. Xiao Chengyan said he would save my life. He certainly wasn't lying. It's just that, in his eyes, as long as a person is still breathing, they are considered alive. As for whether they have a name or can see the light of day, that doesn't matter. Xingdai asked, Miss, what should we do? I folded the torn page and tucked it into my sleeve. Go find Shen Wangqiu. She paused in surprise. The chief clerk Shen, from the Privy Council. Tell him that if Pei Shuo returns alive, the question array note from 7 years ago will also return. Will he help us? I don't know. 10 years ago, when my father was convicted, Shen Wangqiu was the youngest clerk in the Privy Council. He had once been promoted by my father. Yet, on the day of the trial, he didn't show up. Every time I've seen him over the years, he's avoided me. If he still refuses, just ask him one thing, I said. Who exactly was the one who rebound Zhang Zhengyuan's military orders back then? Xingdai jotted it down. Before leaving, she clung desperately to the prison door. Miss, you've done your best regarding the border troops. If they still want your life, don't concern yourself with it anymore. I looked at the wound on the back of her hand. I'm not doing this for Xiao Chengyan, but every time, they're the ones who take the credit. They won't be able to take it this time. The confession has already been submitted to the Privy Council. Each of the 3 government offices has kept a copy on file. Even if I die, the strategy for the salt route will remain in Zhang Lingyi's confession. After Xingdai left, I washed my wrists with the cold water the jailer had brought. Then I asked Assistant Minister Chen for a sheet of paper. What for? To write a letter of divorce. He looked as if he'd heard something absurd. You may be executed in 3 days. That's precisely why I must write it today. I didn't put pen to paper right away. It wasn't that I was reluctant. According to the laws of Deshang, a divorce between a prince's consort and her husband requires the seal of the Imperial Household Bureau. Confined in the imperial prison, there was simply no way to send the divorce decree out. I folded the blank sheet of paper and tucked it under my pillow. I'll wait a little longer, I thought. At the very least, I had to make sure it reached him. Early on the third morning, someone from the imperial prison came to change my clothes. It wasn't a prison uniform. It was an old plain skirt, washed until it was almost white. His Majesty summons you to the palace to grade the imperial examination essays, said Assistant Minister Chen. Is there any news from Yanhuigu Valley? Pei Shuo has stabilized the grain supply route using your strategy, and the first group of wounded soldiers has been evacuated via the salt road, but the main force has not yet broken free. What about Qiling Wan? She is also in the Taiji Hall. The iron shackles were fastened around her wrists once more. All the way into the palace, the chains dragged across the stone steps, their clanking sound particularly heavy. 2 fresh military reports were laid out inside the hall. Qiling Wan stood before the imperial desk, her face slightly paler than it had been on the day of her investiture. She still wore the golden seal, though one hand remained pressed against her sleeve. Emperor Chengxi saw the shackles on my wrists and frowned, but did not order anyone to remove them. Madam Zhang, I shall ask you and Guiguashi 3 questions each. If you can answer them, I will continue investigating your case. If you fail to answer, you need not return to the imperial prison today. I knelt. This guilty woman obeys your Majesty's command. The first military report stated that the number of cooking fires in the enemy camp had decreased by 2 during the day, while the number of torches at night had actually increased. The emperor asked, what are the enemy forces intending to do? Qiling Wan answered first. Their provisions are running low, so they've reduced the number of cooking fires during the day and set up more torches at night to create a false sense of strength. We should take advantage of their unstable morale and attack immediately. I asked, is the horse manure outside the enemy camp fresh or old? The Privy Councillor consulted the attached page. What we saw yesterday was all left 2 days ago. The horses are no longer in the camp, I said. The torches at night are merely for our troops to see. The enemy's main force is in the process of moving. The emperor asked, where are they moving to? Whitestone Ravine. Qiling Wan immediately said, Whitestone Ravine is in a low-lying area. It's not suitable for stationing troops. That's why they aren't stationing troops there, I said. They're pursuing the Zhenbei army as it withdraws along the salt route. Whitestone Ravine is the only route westward. The second military report stated that large numbers of broken tree branches had been found outside the valley, with their branches and leaves pointing north. Qiling Wan said, the enemy is moving north. No. I placed the military report back on the desk. The fact that all the branches and leaves are pointing north indicates the trees were dragged from the south. The enemy is cutting down trees on the southern slope and transporting them to the north to build a bridge. They know Pei Shuo won't launch a direct assault on the southern slope, so they're preparing to cross the ravines on the north side to cut off the exit from the salt road. Silence fell over the hall. Emperor Chengxi's gaze toward me had changed. The third question. A palace attendant unfurled a topographic map that did not indicate the strength of either side's forces. Should Pei Shuo's main force engage in battle today, or should it retreat? I studied it for a moment. Your Majesty, please retrieve the original military strategies from the battles at Qingxi Ridge, Muhui Valley, and the first battle of Yanhui Valley 7 years ago. Kui Shiqing stepped forward. Your Majesty is asking about the current battle situation, yet the Jiang clan is stalling by searching through old records. Clearly, they have no answer. It's not that I can't answer, I said. The third question is when to abandon the strategy. If I don't know how the previous 2 strategies were evaluated, whether I advocate fighting or retreating today, it would amount to nothing more than a guess. Emperor Chengxi's expression darkened. Why must it be the old strategies? Because the half-volume in State Councillor Kui's possession only describes how to win. I looked at Qiling Wan. It doesn't say when to admit defeat, she replied coldly. To speak of defeat before the battle has even begun. Is that the conduct of a strategist? Forcing troops that should retreat to continue marching to their deaths. That is not the conduct of a strategist. Kui Shiqing snapped. How dare you? The emperor raised his hand to silence him. Retrieve the archives. An official from the Privy Council hesitated and said, Your Majesty, some of the old records from 7 years ago are currently being reorganized. Several volumes are temporarily missing. I asked, who is in charge of archiving? In the corner, a man's face suddenly turned pale. Shen Wengku. He lowered his head. It is this servant. The emperor looked at him. Find the old records by tomorrow. Your servant obeys. I was escorted back to the side of the hall and not sent away immediately. Qiling Wan took out an old scroll. Your Majesty, the fact that the Jiang woman can answer questions about military affairs does not prove that she is Master Jiaye. She unrolled the scroll. This is a fragment of military law left behind by Zhang Zhengyuan. Since Lady Zhang learned these from her father, she is naturally capable of analyzing the course of battle. I saw the characters on the fragment. They were my father's handwriting. The first page was titled, Proper Strategy. The second page was titled, Counterarguments. The page number on the third page, however, jumped from 12 to 14. A page was missing in the middle. Kui Shiqing said, The daughter of a traitor who is well versed in a traitor's military strategy may not necessarily be a blessing for the court. Emperor Chengxi turned to Xiao Chengyan. 7th brother. Xiao Chengyan stepped forward from among the ministers. You have been married to Lady Zhang for 7 years. I have only one question for you. Were the military strategies of these past 7 years actually written by her? I stood at the side of the hall, the iron chains still bound around my wrists. This was his last chance. No need for scheming. Nor was there any need to wait another half year. All he had to do was tell the truth. Xiao Chengyan raised his eyes. His gaze first fell on Kui Shiqing, then swept over the other court officials from prominent families. Finally, he looked at me. Lady Lingyi did indeed transcribe military reports for this humble son. Sometimes she would also offer her insights during casual conversations in the inner quarters. But there is another person known as Master Jia. The Taiyi Hall was far too spacious, so every word he spoke carried clearly. I did not look at him again. Emperor Chengxi remained silent for a long time. Detain Lady Zhang in the side hall for the time being. Once the old records have been retrieved, we will decide her fate. As I passed by Xiao Chengyan, he took half a step forward. My sleeve did not pause for a moment. I waited all night in the side hall. Just as dawn was breaking, the sound of urgent horse hooves suddenly echoed from outside the palace gates. Someone shouted, "Good news from the northern frontier." The hall doors were flung open. Pei Shuo was covered in dust, with dried mud still clinging to his armor. He looked as if he had just returned from the battlefield. He hadn't even changed out of his court robes, and upon entering the hall, he knelt on one knee. "This servant, Pei Shuo, has returned to the capital in accordance with the imperial edict." 4 personal guards followed behind him. One held a report of victory, another carried a wooden box. 2 of them worked together to carry an iron chest sealed with the military seal. Emperor Chengxi summoned the court officials that very night. Pei Shuo reported directly in the hall. After the Zhenbei army withdrew from the abandoned salt trail, they did not launch a surprise attack on the riverbank as planned by Kui Lingwan, but instead retreated westward according to the hidden sequence in my confession. Sure enough, the enemy forces pursued them to Baishi Creek. Pei Shuo destroyed the wooden bridge upstream in advance, and ambushed archers on both sides of the mountain cliffs, killing 4,000 enemy soldiers in a single battle. Of the 30,000-strong main force, fewer than 20% were lost. "A hidden sequence?" asked Emperor Chengxi. Pei Shuo presented a transcribed copy of the testimony. The grain quantities listed at the end of each paragraph by Ms. Zhang, when arranged in reverse order, reveal the dates and directions of the retreat. This is the verification method Master Jia has used in his military correspondence with me over the past 7 years. Kui Lingwan said, "A single writing style alone cannot prove her identity. She has been at the 7th prince's residence for many years. Perhaps she has seen old letters." Pei Shuo did not argue with her. He raised his hand. A personal guard placed the wooden box in front of the imperial desk. Inside the box were 27 letters. Some of the envelopes had yellowed, some were stained with blood, and 2 bore scorch marks along the edges. "Your servant has garrisoned the northern frontier for 7 years, and has received a total of 27 strategic memos from Master Jia. Each one bears a military receipt, the relay station's timestamp, and the seal of the Privy Council. The earliest one dates back to the 21st year of the Chengxi era. At that time, Kui Lingwan had not yet reached the age of coming of age." Pei Shuo opened the first envelope. "Master Jia never directly tells your servant how to fight this battle. Every time, he asks 3 questions first. If the military reports are entirely true, how should we deploy our forces? If what the scouts saw was a deliberate display by the enemy, how can we disprove it? If both are wrong, when should we withdraw?" He looked at Kui Lingwan. "I've seen many of the military strategies in Quiguoshi's possession, while in the northern frontier. Yet, I have never received a single inquiry from you regarding the battle formation." Kui Lingwan's face turned pale, but she persisted. "Inquiry notes can be forged." "Indeed." Pei Shuo took out one of the letters. This note was written in June of the 23rd year of the Chengxi era. The letter asks why 76 horses were underreported in the Battle of Muhuai River. At the time, I suspected embezzlement by the quartermaster. After investigating for half a month, I discovered that a sudden downpour had washed away the horses' carcasses, leading to an error in the head count. This matter was not included in the official military report. I only mentioned it to Mr. Jia in my reply. He turned to me. "Zhang, do you recall how the matter was handled afterward?" I replied. "The quartermaster was not disciplined." "Why?" "Although the number of dead horses was incorrect, the amount of fodder was correct. If someone had underreported the number of horses, it would have been impossible to still receive fodder based on the original count. Therefore, it was not embezzlement." Pei Shuo unfolded the reply. It bore his handwriting from 7 years ago. It matched my answer word for word. Kui Lingwan suddenly said, "The 7th prince has also seen these letters." She heard this from His Highness. Everyone's gaze turned to Xiao Chengyan. His expression had grown extremely grim. I said, "Then we won't look at the letters." A palace attendant brought in a blank military map. I walked up to the map, the iron chain still dragging from my wrist. "Your Majesty, please withdraw all military documents from Quiguoshi's possession." Kui Lingwan pressed down on the half-volume of old manuscripts. "Zhang Lingyi, what are you trying to do? Since we both call ourselves Master Jia, let's start over from the beginning." I placed a black stone on Qingxi Ridge. The first battle, 7 years ago. The military report states only that the enemy has 2,000 troops, is stationed at Qingxi Ridge, and draws water 3 times each afternoon. Please run through the scenario, Quiguoshi. Kui Lingwan did not move. I asked, "What is the best course of action?" She replied, "Avoid their sharpest attack, set fire to Shilin, and force the cavalry to come out of their formation." That is the conclusion. I asked again, "Why are you certain there is cavalry at Shilin?" She pressed her lips tightly together. "There are clues in the military report." "What clues?" She looked at Xiao Chengyan. He remained silent. I answered for her. 2,000 horses couldn't possibly draw water just once a day. There isn't enough water on the ridge, so the hoof prints and dust clouds seen in the military report are fake. I placed a white stone. This is the right strategy. Then I moved a black stone outside the western forest. What if the enemy knows we'll burn the forest and clears a firebreak in advance? Kui Lingwan said, then we'll take the northern route instead. The northern route is a sheer cliff. We can order the infantry to climb it. The military report mentioned that it has been raining for days. The cliff is slippery, and the infantry would have to shed their armor to climb. The enemy need only drop rocks from the cliff's edge, and none of our troops would survive. Her breathing became erratic. I withdrew the black piece. What if there are no cavalry in the western forest and Qingxi Ridge isn't a decoy after all? No one in the hall spoke. Then we'll abandon that strategy. I said, withdraw all the fire oil, secure the supply lines, and wait for the second military report. Kui Lingwan sneered, if every strategy leaves a way out, how can we seize the opportunity to strike? That's why you only copied the answer. I looked at her. You don't know why the answer holds true, nor do you realize that if the conditions change, that answer will kill people. I had my attendants lay out the 27 strategic inquiry letters. None of the letters were long. Some were no more than half a page. I then asked a palace attendant to fetch the transcribed copies preserved by the Privy Council. Everyone, please look at the military supply codes at the end of each strategic proposal. A Privy Councillor read aloud. A -3, D-7, B-2. In reverse order. B-2, D-7, a -3. That corresponds to the 7th line of the second battle strategy letter, the third question. The Privy Councillor found that line. It was indeed the discarded strategy that had been deleted from the transcript. I pointed to another document. Bing 6, Yi 4, Wu 1. Turning to the corresponding letter, it was a counter-argument. The 27 battle strategy letters corresponded one-to-one with the 27 documents archived by the Privy Council. Those seemingly ordinary military supply codes recorded the sequence of modifications made during each simulation. Anyone who had only received half a volume of conclusions could not possibly know this. Shen Wenqua knelt down. Your Majesty, I am guilty. He presented a file box that had been sealed for many years. The military strategies sent by the 7th Prince's house to the Privy Council did not originally bear Master Jiaye's signature. Before each transcription, a question and answer note was attached. After the 24th year of the Chengxi era, the 7th Prince's residence requested that the battle analysis notes be kept separately, retaining only the final conclusions. The Emperor looked at Xiao Chengyan. Was that your order? Xiao Chengyan's throat tightened. This humble son did so to protect the person who submitted the strategy. Protect whom? He could not answer. I retrieved the earliest copy of the Qingxi Ridge military strategy. There was an alteration in the southeast corner of the transcript. 7 years ago, a corner of the original military report delivered to the mansion was burned by a candle flame. I misread the place name, causing the first draft to take a detour of 10 li. When I rewrote it later, this trace of a correction remained. Only I and the 7th Prince know about this. Emperor Chengxi looked at Xiao Chengyan. The 7th? Xiao Chengyan closed his eyes briefly. Yes. One word. Lighter than all his previous denials. Yet, it was enough. No one in the hall spoke up for Kui Lingwan anymore. She still clutched that golden seal tightly. At most, this proves that Jiang Lingyi wrote military strategies. It doesn't prove that they all came from her. I asked, then please let Kui Guaxi explain why the old strategy for Yanhuigu Valley ended with the line, when the water recedes 3 feet, this strategy is void. She lowered her head and flipped through the manuscript. That sentence was written in the margin. The handwriting was very small. She had seen it before, but had never truly understood it. Because her lips moved slightly. Because shallow water is not conducive to boat travel. Yanhuigu doesn't use boats. It's because the riverbed is exposed, making it easy for enemy forces to spot us. Quite the opposite. I placed a clump of wet mud on the map. The river receded too quickly while the surface appears to be a road. It's still soft mud underneath. Light cavalry can cross, but supply wagons cannot. The proper strategy tells you how to proceed. The counterexample tells you under what circumstances you cannot proceed. The abandonment strategy tells you that once the supply wagons fail to cover 30 li in a day, you must immediately withdraw the army. You're missing the last 2 pages. That's why. You sent 30,000 men to their deaths. The golden seal slipped from Kui Lingwan's hand. It crashed onto the imperial steps and rolled twice. Xiao Chengyan suddenly stepped forward. Father, all the military strategies Lingyi submitted were sent through the 7th Prince's mansion, as husband and wife. Even though I did not publicly reveal my identity before, I did not intentionally claim credit for them. I turned around. Husband and wife. He seemed to be clinging to his last lifeline. Lingyi, I have never denied your talent. I was merely constrained by the Q family for a time. We have come this far together. Half of the honors and disgraces bestowed upon the 7th Prince's mansion rightfully belong to you. I asked, if the achievements belong to both husband and wife, why was only Kui Lingwan and theft? His expression froze. Why then, was only I convicted? No one in the hall answered for him. Kui Lingwan's true identity had already been exposed, yet Kui Shiking still refused to admit guilt. Kneeling before the throne, he claimed his daughter had merely been deceived, and that half a manuscript had come from a female attendant in a prince's mansion who had died of illness. As for the old case involving Zhang Zhengyuan, he insisted it had absolutely no connection to today's events. Pei Shuo ordered his men to open the iron chest they had brought back to the capital. Inside were not weapons. Instead, there were more than 10 ledgers. After I captured the enemies by Shijian camp, I discovered these in the cellar of the granary. The ledgers recorded the flow of salt, tea, ironware, and horses. All the trading houses listed were based within the borders of Dashang. The one that appeared most frequently was Yongtong Trading House, registered under the Kuai family's name. Kui Shiking immediately replied, "Our trading houses are spread throughout the realm. It's hardly surprising that someone might have impersonated us." Pei Shuo flipped to the last few pages. Every shipment had traveled along an old salt route, the abandoned trail on the western side of Yanhui Valley. I spotted one of the secret marks, 3 horizontal lines, with the ends curving downward. It was identical to the red mark on Chumping's right wrist that she kept trying to hide. Vice Minister Chen ordered his men to bring Chumping into the hall. After she knelt, she didn't dare to look up. "Who told you to put the general's map in the princess consort's study?" It was this servant herself. Vice Minister Chen threw the ledger in front of her. "The mark on your wrist is used by Yongtong merchants to verify the identities of their cargo handlers. Your family is currently at the Kuai family estate." Chumping trembled all over. Kui Shiqing roared angrily, "You vile servant, you're making false accusations. I'll tell you." She suddenly collapsed to the ground. It was the matron who serves Miss Kui who approached me. She said that as long as I did as I was told, she would let my younger brother come home. "What does the key to the secret compartment look like?" Chumping looked at Xiao Chengyan through her tears. "It was drawn for me by someone close to His Highness." Xiao Chengyan suddenly looked up. "Nonsense. This servant does not know the man's name. He was carrying an identification token from the 7th prince's residence, and said Your Highness had already agreed that as long as the item was placed inside, the princess consort's life would not be truly endangered." Everyone's gaze fell upon him. His lips twitched. "I only agreed to temporarily withhold the original manuscript. I never ordered anyone to frame her. Perhaps Your Highness did not say it with your own mouth." I looked at him. "But you handed over the key." He did not deny it. The Kui family wanted evidence. Xiao Chengyan wanted me to keep quiet for the time being. They all thought that as long as they didn't actually kill me, they'd still have a way out. Shen Wenku presented another old file box. "Your Majesty, this is the original military order from the 17th year of the Chengxi era regarding the Zhangzheng Yuan treason case." The pages of the military order were not consecutively numbered, and there were 2 rows of binding holes. One row had turned black. The other row, however, looked newer. When I was ordered to organize the case files back then, I discovered that the military order had been unbound and rebound. Minister Zhang's original order consisted of 14 pages, but only 13 remained when it was filed. The missing page is the 13th, the exculpatory evidence. That page stated, "If merchant caravans continue to travel at night along the Yanhuigu salt route, it indicates that smuggling in the northern border has not ceased. Therefore, the garrison on the western flank must not be withdrawn according to the original plan." The emperor asked, "Who ordered you to conceal this?" Shen Wenku lowered his head. The then Secretary of the Privy Council had accepted silver from the Kui family. I was too timid to dare report it. For the past 10 years, I have lived in constant anxiety. Kui Shiqing snapped. "That's just one side of the story." Pei Shuo pulled a sheet of paper from a secret compartment in the ledger. The paper had been eaten through by insects in several places. It bore his father's handwriting. It was indeed the missing 13th page. At the bottom of the page was a receipt stamp from the Kui family's private treasury. Back then, his father had discovered that the Kui family was using the salt route to smuggle ironware into enemy territory, so he had changed military orders on the spot to keep the western garrison in place. Kui Shiqing intercepted the incriminating page and twisted the altered order into an unauthorized abandonment of the defensive line. The defeat at the 3 cities was not because my father colluded with the enemy. Rather, it was precisely because the Kui family, in order to protect their smuggling route, leaked the military's defensive deployments. After bearing this false accusation for 10 years, I finally have proof of its origin. Emperor Chengxi remained silent for a long time. I knelt in the hall, my fingernails digging deep into the palms of my hands. Before my father was escorted to the execution ground, he looked at me through the bars of the prison cart. I was 14 at the time. The common people lining the streets were all cursing him as a traitor. He offered no defense, but said just one sentence to me. "Lingyi, military reports can be mistaken, and people can lie. You must look at why they did this." 10 years later, I finally saw the truth. Kui Shiqing did not assume the identity of Master Zhaoye simply to win a power struggle within the court. He had known all along that once my father's method of deduction resurfaced, someone would trace the missing counter-evidence back to the Yandao in Yanhui Valley. Therefore, he had to ensure that the Jiang family's method became the Kui family's achievement, and he had to turn Jiang Lingyi into a criminal who had stolen credit. Even as the imperial guards pinned him down, Kui Shiqing continued to protest loudly. Emperor Chengxi would listen no longer. Kui Shiqing forged military orders, smuggled iron goods, and colluded with the enemy, imprisoned him in the Celestial Prison. Kui Lingwan stole military secrets, fraudulently claimed the title of National Scholar, and misled the border troops. Strip her of her title and imprison her along with him. A eunuch picked up the golden seal and returned it to its case. The emperor turned to Xiao Chengyan. "Seventh son, you knew full well that the Jiang family was the true Master Zhaoye. Why did you conceal this?" Xiao Chengyan knelt. This son was momentarily confused. Was it also foolish of you to allow the Kusei family to frame your own princess consort? This humble son merely wished to stabilize the court for the time being. Once the heir apparent is named, I will clear her name. Will you? Qingdai's voice suddenly rang out from outside the hall. She was held back by guards, holding the charred, torn page high in her hand. Your Majesty, this servant has evidence. She was ushered into the hall. The fragment was placed on the imperial desk. After the emperor finished reading it, his expression grew increasingly somber. The signed record of the arrangements for the inner court ladies of the Eastern Palace. Xiao Chengyan looked up abruptly. Father, that's just an unfinished draft. The clerk from the prince's mansion was summoned to the throne room. He knelt on the ground, his forehead covered in cold sweat. Your Majesty, this record was drafted on the second day after Miss Kui arrived in the capital. His Royal Highness the 7th Prince ordered me to prepare accommodations in the West Garden, announced to the public that the princess consort had passed away from illness, and in reality, move her to a separate residence. Military reports, paper, and ink were delivered every 10 days, and no outsiders were permitted to enter or leave. The emperor asked, why report that she died of illness? The clerk dared not look at Xiao Chengyan. His Highness said that only the dead will no longer vie for the title of Master Jiaye. The last trace of color drained from Xiao Chengyan's face. He turned to me. Lingyi, let me explain. I unfastened the prince's consort's seal from my waist. You want to protect both me and the position of crown prince. Yes, he said urgently. I never intended to kill you. Although the West Garden is secluded, it won't lack for resources. Once the political situation stabilizes, I can still what? He fell silent. Let me live under a different name. Make everyone believe that Jiang Lingyi is dead, then send the military reports to the West Garden. Xiao Chengyan, you've never wanted me. I set the official seal on the ground. What you want is a pair of hands that can draft strategies for you, but won't ask for your name. He crawled half a step toward me on his knees and reached out to grab me. The iron chain stretched across between us just in time. No. Lingyi, I love you. I looked at him. There was fear in his eyes, as well as pain. Perhaps he wasn't lying. It's just that in his love, the imperial throne came first, his reputation came first, and the interests of the 7th prince's household came first. I could be hidden away, I could be convicted, or I could be declared dead in the eyes of the world. As long as I remained in his hands, he felt he hadn't lost me. I took out the letter of divorce I'd written while imprisoned in the imperial prison from my sleeve. Later, Vice Minister Chen helped me complete the formalities required by the Imperial Household Bureau. There was only one signature on the paper. Jiang Lingyi, Your Majesty. I presented it with both hands. This subject requests a divorce from the 7th prince. Xiao Chengyan stared intently at the paper. I do not agree. I did not look at him. Emperor Chengxi remained silent for a moment. At the most critical moment in the struggle for the throne, a prince condoned a prominent family's falsification of military merits, framed his lawful wife, and nearly led to the annihilation of 30,000 border troops. This marriage is no longer merely a family matter. Approved. The emperor's voice fell silent. An official from the Imperial Household Department stepped forward to collect the divorce decree. Xiao Chengyan suddenly grabbed the hem of my skirt. Lingyi, give me one more chance. I took a step back. The hem of my skirt slipped from his grasp. You've already had 2 chances. One was at the investiture ceremony. The other was when His Majesty asked you who had authored the 7-year military strategy. I unfastened the iron shackles on my wrists, which had already loosened, and placed them beside the seal of the imperial prince's consort. I've used them all up. The retrial of Zhang Zhengyuan's old case had been underway for 2 months. His father was reinstated as a counselor of the Privy Council, and the charge of collusion with the enemy was dropped. The old military orders were rebound, and the missing 13th page was finally returned to its rightful place. After Kui Shiking was imprisoned, the Kui clan of Qinghe immediately split into separate branches. A collateral branch submitted a memorial stating that the clan head's actions had nothing to do with the clan. Emperor Chengxi did not hold the entire clan accountable, but he seized the Yongtong trading house and the Kui family's estates in the northern frontier. Kui Lingwan's title of national scholar was revoked. She was sentenced to exile in Shuozhou and barred from returning to the capital for life for stealing state secrets, framing a prince's consort, and misleading the border troops. Before leaving the capital, she requested an audience with me. I did not go. There was nothing left for us to say to one another. She believed that by possessing the manuscript, the support of a prominent family, and the trust of court officials, she could become Master Jiaye. It wasn't her memory that failed her. It was that she had never truly taken responsibility for the lives of those whose stories were written on paper. Xiao Chengyan was stripped of his status as heir apparent, had 3 of his fiefdoms revoked, and was exiled to Nanling for withholding military intelligence, condoning perjury, and deceiving the emperor. Before he left the capital, he waited for me outside the gates of the Privy Council for an entire day. By the time my shift ended, it was already pitch black. He stood at the foot of the stone steps, still wearing that old jade buckle engraved with the characters, Tongxin, at his waist. Lingyi. I paused for a moment. Not because I was reluctant to leave. It was just that hearing that name come from his mouth made it feel strangely unfamiliar to me. I have already apologized to His Majesty, he said. I was indeed wrong regarding the Qi family. As for the documents from the Western Garden, I never really intended to use them. They've already been stamped with the inner seal. At the time, it was just to put Kui Shiking's mind at ease, so sacrificing me would make it easier to put his mind at ease. His lips pressed into a straight line. Do you have to interpret it that way? It's not a matter of interpretation, that's what the documents say. He seemed to want to say something else. I walked past him. Lingyi. This time, I didn't stop. A month later, a letter arrived from Nanling. Qingdai asked if I wanted to read it. I told her to send it right back, unopened. The second and third letters met the same fate. After that, Nanling stopped sending letters. In the newly revised record of military merits, the Battle of Yanhuigu listed 2 names at the very top. Pei Shuo, commander of the Northern Defense Army. Zhang Lingyi, the strategist. Xiao Chengyan's name was listed afterward. Just 1 sentence. At first, I believed the false strategy. Later, I realized the truth had not been reported. The reputation for strategic brilliance he had spent 7 years building was, in the end, rewritten by the court historian. Emperor Chengxi summoned me to the palace and asked if I was willing to remain in the Privy Council. No woman has ever served as a Privy Councillor in the court. Seated behind the imperial desk, his tone was far from gentle. I am making an exception today, but that does not mean I trust you completely. I understand, Your Majesty. Pei Shuo stated in his memorial that your input on military strategy will still be needed in the northern frontier. What the border troops need is someone who can verify military reports. It does not necessarily have to be me. The emperor looked at me for a moment. You, unlike others, do not seem eager to receive a title. I have already met someone who should not have been granted a title. He did not press the matter further. The name Master Jia has already spread among the common people. If you are willing to continue using it, there might be less resistance within the court. I looked up. No, thank you. Why? Master Jia belongs only within the 7th Prince's mansion. I am no longer there. Emperor Chengxi tapped the desk with his knuckles. Then, in the name of Lady Zhang, you shall temporarily serve as a special advisor to the Privy Council. You will hold no official rank, occupy no actual post, and serve on a 1-year probationary basis. It was not a position of unreserved trust, nor would a single reversal of my case be enough to make everyone in court forget that I am the daughter of a convicted minister, the divorced princess consort of Healy, or simply a woman. But I accepted the appointment. This servant obeys the imperial decree. On my first day at the Privy Council, many were reluctant to hand over military reports to me. Shen Wangku brought me a stack of old files. He had been demoted 3 ranks for concealing an old case 10 years ago. Before resigning from his post, he helped me organize my father's unpublished manuscripts. If Minister Zhang were still here, he would surely be happy for you. I flipped through the files without answering. Whether my father would be happy, I have no way of knowing. All I know is that his name has finally been restored to the case files. It is no longer circled in red ink, nor is it listed alongside the words, collusion with the enemy. A year later, I was ordered to inspect military supplies in the northern frontier. The Yanhui River had completely changed its course. The old riverbed, which had once trapped 30,000 people, was now overgrown with short grass. From a distance, it looked like nothing more than an ordinary stretch of wasteland. Pei Shuo met me outside the camp. This was the first time we had actually met. For the past 7 years, I had only seen his name in military reports. He was even more taciturn than I had imagined. After exchanging courtesies, he had his bodyguard bring over a wooden box. Your things. Inside the box were 27 battle strategy notes. The same phrase was written on each of the old envelopes. To Mr. Jia, personally. I picked up the earliest letter. The corners of the paper were still dusted with sand from the northern frontier. Why are you returning them all to me? The Privy Council has already made new copies. These are the originals. They belong to you. You've kept them for 7 years. Every valid military order received by the army must be preserved. He didn't say it was for my sake, nor did he use these letters to ask anything of me. That evening, a new border defense map was delivered to the camp. The handwriting on the envelope was neat and forceful. To be opened personally by Zhang Lingyi, Privy Councillor. I stared at it for a long time. Pei Shuo stood outside the tent, offering no prompting. After a moment he asked, is it all right if future military reports are addressed this way? I opened the envelope. Yes. The wind rustled the tent flap, and the old letter and the new military report were stacked together. The one on top was addressed, to be opened personally by Zhang Lingyi, Counselor to the Privy Council.